This time on Rad Rat Video, we're talking about the Ollie North, both the name and the trick itself, and a bunch of other questions. Let's do it. Welcome back to Rad Rat Video, a channel where I talk a lot about skateboarding. I teach tricks, I teach histories of, biographies of skaters. I talk about old skateboarding games, new skateboarding games, answering your questions here, and all kinds of other stuff. But questions are what we're doing today. First is from Josh, who says, where did the word tech come from in skating? Doesn't really seem to have anything to do with the type of skating it describes. I disagree. That type of skateboarding is very technical. So imagine you can either kickflip a bunch of stairs or you can do a kickflip back tail on a ledge. Which one of them is more technical? Right? With the kickflip downstairs, the kickflip itself, not super hard. The hard part is getting the guts to do it, committing to it, doing it with style, managing all that speed and being able to land and roll away and all that. With a kickflip to tail slide, it's okay, I got to approach at this correct angle. I want to shift my weight a little bit forward as the board flips so that the tail comes up as it comes around, so I don't have to worry about hitting the tail on the edge. My weight needs to be back, but not too far back, because I want to land and slide. But since I'm going to stick slightly when I slide, I want to land and kind of do this with my foot a little bit to get the slide going, because then I'll break the barrier to get it going, and then once I slide slightly, if I kept my shoulders facing this way, I can pull it back around forward. It'd be cooler if I could land it to fakie though, but to do that, I should probably move my shoulders a little bit as I pop, and then that way, as I slide it out, my shoulders will keep going, and I can, there's a lot more technical details involved. It's not flick and then stomp it down. I'm not saying kickflipping a gap is harder or easier. It'd be a lot harder for me. I'm just saying from the details that you need to think about, there's more going into a technical trick. That's why it's called technical. Okay, next question is from eSkate James. What is your take on the growing popularity of electric skateboards, and how do you think this will affect skateboarding culture? Feels like this is an evolutionary step for transport that's been building for 30 years. Either a lot of people have been asking me about this lately, or you've been asking me this in every possible format, but I don't think I've ever seen someone on an e-skate, on an electric skateboard riding around, maybe once, but I just don't see it very common. I see people on skateboards for travel, like on a longboard or whatever, but I don't think an electric skateboard will ever be better than a bike. That's it. I don't see any benefit to it. Yes, you can take it with you, but there's bike racks everywhere, so that's not really a problem. But how many times have you seen, I see this a lot when I'm stopped at a light somewhere, someone on a longboard will be crossing the street, and they get to the side, and there's some snow or ice or something like that, right in the corner where the sidewalk starts, and then there's that patch of the bumps, for blind people where they can hit the rough spot with their cane and they know the road starts. There's that part right there, and then there's a big crack maybe in the telephone pole, and you can't really turn that tightly on a longboard. So what happens? You get most of the way across the street, you jump off, you pick it up, and you walk around, and then you put it back down, and you start to push, usually mongoing back down the sidewalk again. And if your board is electric, you still have those same problems, And a bike, your wheels are this big. You got a 27-inch wheel versus a 58 millimeter wheel or whatever. You can just roll over it. So I don't see the benefit personally. I've had companies come to me, usually weird Chinese companies, come to me and say hey, we'll send you a review copy of our electric skateboard. And I've always said no, because I don't know when I would use it. Now, me personally, I work in my basement. I don't have to commute anywhere. If I ever leave the house, it's usually to go shopping somewhere where I need, carrying capacity. I'm not going to go home, with the bags of groceries running down both my arms, and I'm on an electric skateboard trying to get home. That'd be ridiculous. I use my car when I have to go somewhere. But if I had to commute, or if I was going to go to hang out at a friend's house down the block or whatever, I get it. I just don't see a benefit over a skateboard. Over a bike. Now, you can get an electric bike. You can get kits for your bike where you add an electric motor, like a pedal helper to your bike, and you can get around and do stuff just fine. The other thing I was thinking of is with a bike, you got a bike lane. At least here where I live, a lot of the cities have bike lanes. There's a city nearby where there's bike paths that are not connected to roads, but you can get like anywhere with them, and there's bridges and everything. It's like a separate road structure for bikes. And that, you know, there you could ride an electric skateboard, you'd have no problem. But where I live now, like you wouldn't skate down the bike lane. The roads have like rocks and dirt and stuff in them. You might have trouble. You might hit like a piece of glass from a broken headlight or something. Riding on the sidewalk isn't great because then you have to, you know, cross all the driveways and stuff and have to worry about it and hit all the cracks, and you have to squeeze by people. I mean, I just don't get them. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm sure there's places in the world where they're perfectly useful. Here and where I used to live, I just can't picture ever needing one. So I don't know. If they work for you, great. I don't see myself using one in the near future. Next question is from Jürgen, who says, I've got a question concerning spin directions with board slides. So his question essentially is, if he approaches with his back to the rail, but he spins front side, why is that called a backside board slide? Well, here you go. It's very simple. The direction that you approach the rail is all that matters when it comes to the direction of the grind. So you are talking about the rail behind you. You're approaching it with the rail behind. Well, you're goofy. So you're this way. The rail is here. You're approaching it. No matter what trick you do, it's backside. That is already determined. The second you push toward the rail, the direction of the grind is determined. If you go this way, it's called a board slide. If you land on the nose, it's a nose slide. You could do a nose grind. You could do a lip slide. You could do a tail slide. Anything you do from that point forward is going to be backside, no matter what, all the time. It gets a little confusing when you spin. If you do like a 270 in or something like that, do you say the spin direction? Maybe, because there's a spin involved. But for all the tricks you're going to do for a long time, the direction of approach is all that matters. Okay. The next question is from Ricky Bobby. Probably the real one, I think. Can you do a trick history on the Ollie 1 foot / Ollie North? It's one of my favorite old school tricks. Matt Hensley does a bunch in Hocus Pocus. When I was younger, I remember other skaters looking at it as a pointless trick that people only do in games of skate. Seems like it was a pretty popular trick for a while, so what killed it? My guess is a change in the shape of skateboards that happened in the early 90s when the nose was raised up and made wider. Also, when did people start calling the trick Ollie North? I'm assuming sometime in the late 80s after the Iran-Contra affair, which seems to be around the height of the trick's popularity, but Matt Hensley called it an Ollie 1 foot in a video around that time, so the name must not have been widely used until later on. If you're wondering why he thinks it's involved to a military event, it's because one of the figures involved in that, who is in the news a lot, was named Oliver North. And so Ollie North was like, you know, just a play on that, like a pun name, essentially. And I think the name, the most common theory that's probably true is that the Tony Hawk games kind of made that popular. And the reason why the Tony Hawk games used it is because the name was shorter. So like when you have to have all the tricks that you're doing on the bottom of the screen counting up and all that stuff, you want to use the shortest name possible. So you wouldn't say, you know, Ollie 1 foot is this long, but Ollie North is this long, so they picked that one. I think that's probably the case. And the Tony Hawk games did a few tricks wrong that are now right because Tony Hawk games have been in skateboarding culture for so long. Like the varial kickflip is technically wrong. Even Tony Hawk did a video not too long ago, like a year or two ago. It's like a quick Instagram video where he says like a varial is done with your hand. That's it. And it's true. If you're on vert, you grab the board and you spin it around, that's called a varial. So if you do a kickflip and you catch it and you spin it around, it's a kickflip varial. Now the board is doing a 180 and a kickflip, and so in the game they use that to mean varial kickflip. I know people were actually using it. You know, the game didn't invent that term, but it is technically wrong. And it'd be a kickflip varial, you know, not the other way around. But still, like they used varial kickflip, and so that's what everyone says. That's what I say. That's what naturally comes out of my mouth when I'm talking about a shove it kickflip or a shove it heel flip, because that's just what everyone has said my whole life, basically, right? And so, yeah, the Tony Hawk games are responsible for a lot of skateboarding culture stuff like that. But that name was used before. They didn't invent it. I think it's just like, you know, these days, if someone invents a trick, and they do it in Germany. And on the same day, someone else in Japan does a trick, someone in Canada does a trick. They all post them online, and everyone can talk about it. And someone could say, oh, I named this trick this, and there you go. There's like definitive proof. Everyone knows where it comes from. Everyone can look at it. Everyone sees it at the same time. But back in the day, it just wasn't like that. If you go back and read early thrashers, well, not early, I mean like early 90s, like around this time that we're talking about, trick names seem like they were very vague, you know, like they could be named this month, next month they'd be calling them something different. It was like, who wrote the caption this month? You know, if it was in an ad and the guy at the company put the caption in, he might have called the trick this, but the guy who worked at the magazine would call it this in an article about it. Like there was a frontside kickflip, shove it, or something like that. Like I said, a hard flip. They were calling it a frontside varial kickflip or something like that. Or inward heel flip versus inside heel flip. There may have even been inside kickflip once or twice. You know, like what's a big spin? You know, is there like, I don't know. There's all kinds of really weird stuff. There was K-grind versus crooked grind versus crook versus... All of this stuff is basically the Wild West. You just call it whatever it's called in your area. One of them caught on. I think that's what happened in this case. So maybe all the people who lived in this city in California call it the Ollie 1 foot. This one guy who was pretty popular called it the Ollie North as a joke one time, and it caught on in his area, and it just, whatever. Both are fine. If you insist that one is right and one is wrong, you're kind of a jerk. Like, it doesn't matter. You're not better than anyone else because your name is more technically correct. It's just a trick. Now, as to why it's not that popular anymore, people do them now. Like they do those weird 360s where you like slide your foot off, but you don't touch the ground. Like it's a no comply without touching the ground. It's like a 1 foot 360. I don't know. That isn't technically the same thing, but doing one-footed stuff is kind of a thing again. I think it's just, it fills this weird spot in your skateboarding, your trick selection, you know, if you, because it's kind of an easy trick. So if you're going to ollie a gap, if you do an ollie, it's probably because that gap is about as big as you can do. So an ollie is the best thing you can do down it. If it's a little bit smaller and you feel more comfortable, maybe try a kickflip. If it's a little bit smaller, maybe try a 360 flip. You know what I mean? But at what point do you put in an ollie 1 foot? To me, that trick is really easy. You just kind of do this and then you put it back. It doesn't take much to do it. You know, so it just fills a weird spot. When do you do that trick? It's kind of like how you don't see a pop shove it now by pros and like major, you know, whatever, coverage, official, professional. When's the last time you saw someone do a pop shove it down a gap? There's nothing wrong with that trick. It's a perfectly good trick. It can look good. There's nothing wrong with doing a pop shove it. You just don't see it. It seems like if you're going to do a basic flip trick, it's going to be a kick flip or a heel flip sometimes. And that's just it. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with any of these tricks, but like that's just the current style. There's a lot of stuff that you don't see anymore, like doing a shifty. When's the last time you saw someone do a shifty? Now, I don't mean a shifty flip. You know, like you do a shifty, if you're not familiar, is when you spin about 90, then you spin back. You've seen like shifty flips a lot. Like you start like a frontside flip and then you catch it and pull it back. When's the last time you've seen someone do a shifty down some stairs? You just don't see it. You know, there's no good reason for it. If you want to be the guy to bring it back, go ahead and do it. That would be cool. So yeah, if you want to do a 1 foot, do a 1 foot. It's cool. I don't care. That's it for this time. If you got more questions, go to radratvideo.com and submit them there, or email me, radratvideo@gmail.com. You can also submit them through Patreon, where I will definitely answer you one way or another. Make sure you tap my logo on screen so that you will see the next video in this series or any of the other weird stuff that I do. And speaking of the weird stuff, there's a sample of it in the sidebar over there. Thank you for watching.